If you have a baby and you're hearing your pediatrician or your baby's pediatrician saying words like hypotonia or low muscle tone or floppy baby, and you really don't have a concrete sit, you don't want to see baby going from lying on their. If you have a baby and you're hearing your pediatrician or your baby's pediatrician saying words like hypotonia or low muscle tone or floppy baby, and you really don't have a concrete understanding of what any of these terms mean, then you're watching the right video. If you're new to my channel, my name is Cherrick Gordon. I've been a pediatric physical therapist for over 25 years. I show parents just like you how to use simple touch and movement to help your baby catch up and move ahead. So let's dive into hypotonia, what that means, what it will look like, and we're going to talk about some of the symptoms. This is actually going to be part of a 3-part series of videos that I'm going to do, a series of lives that I'm going to do. The first one is going to be just diving into what exactly hypotonia or low muscle tone is. The second one is going to be some concrete exercises and techniques that you can use to help your baby improve their gross motor milestones, get some movement skills, build some strength and some core trunk stability. And then the third one is going to be if your baby is able to walk. I have found a device that you can use to help your baby walk, because babies with hypotonia tend to fall a lot even after they're walking. So that's the path we're on. So let's talk about what hypotonia is, what it means. Hypotonia, if you think about it, is your muscles just being too relaxed. That's kind of the simplest way of putting it. It's, imagine if you were getting a massage and you were laid out on the table, you're relaxed, you're kind of half asleep. Think of the state that all your muscles are in. That's kind of what it's like for your baby. Now, imagine you get a phone call and now you've got to get up in a hurry. So now you've got to harness all your energy, come from this semi-restful state that you're in and get going, get yourself up to get moving. And now imagine that being 5 or 10 times as difficult as that. That's what it's like for your baby who has hypotonia. A lot of times parents have told me that they've taken their baby to the doctor, they did an MRI, and the MRI came back and was like, everything's fine. That is because hypotonia, and explaining hypotonia, it will not show up on an MRI. There's really no known cause of why your baby's muscles are soft. So if you're looking at your baby and you're wondering, does my baby have hypotonia? Is this something that I should even be worrying about or concerned about? Here are a couple of signs and symptoms that I'm going to give you. If you go to pick up your baby and you put your arms around your baby and your baby feels like this is going to happen, if you are not like grabbing onto your baby, then your baby may have hypotonia. If you pick up your baby and your baby's head is hanging backwards as you're picking your baby up from the back, lying on their back, your baby may have hypotonia. If you go to pick your baby up and you have a cup of coffee in one hand and you feel like, you know what, I cannot pick this kid up with one hand because they're going to be hanging and everything's going to be floppy and it's not going to be safe, the baby's going to fall out of my hand, I got to use 2 hands and I got to hold on. Like if you have to think and make a concerted effort when you are picking your baby up and you have to go behind the head and hold baby's head up, then your baby may have hypotonia. Your baby just seems, there's a term called a ragdoll baby, except they don't have ragdolls anymore. I don't know if they make them anymore, but baby just feels like they are not doing their work when you pick them up. Most of the time when you pick a baby up, the baby kind of tenses up their body, their muscles, all their muscles kind of get in gear, for lack of a better phrase. And you pick your baby up, you hold your baby's able to hold their head up on their own. They don't kind of collapse onto you. Now, let's say your baby is not an infant. Let's say you have a baby who is 6 months, 7 months, 8 months. and you're wondering, does my baby have hypotonia? Should my baby be included in this group? Well, I'm going to give you a couple of things to look for when you're looking at your baby, and you'll be able to tell. For instance, if you put your baby to sit on this chair, a baby with low muscle tone or hypotonia will do this. They'll lean back and they'll kind of melt into the chair. If you're not careful, the baby might actually slide down because they're having such a hard time just holding their body up against gravity. And so another way to tell is if you put your baby to sit on the ground. We're going to move the camera down onto the ground and take a look at what that would actually look like, where you put your baby down on the ground So if you put your baby down on the ground in the seated position, and let's start one more time, move that down. Can you see the baby's legs? Okay, good. If you put your baby to sit on the ground and baby sits and immediately baby goes into this position, which is called the W seating position. I'm going to turn her around so that you can see from the back, where you can see that her legs kind of form a W, where she is sitting, she's got her hands propped on the ground, but there's this W pattern. The W sitting position is a classic position that babies with low muscle tone tend to get into because it increases their base of support, and they can just plop down in the middle and not have to do a whole lot of trunk work when they're in this position. So those are some of the things that you want to keep an eye out for if you feel like your baby may have hypotonia. Now, there's also another set of things to look out for. If you look at your baby's hands and look at your baby's knees, your baby's ankles, your baby's wrists, you will notice something peculiar. You will notice that your baby can take their knuckles and bring them all the way back. Like if you took my knuckle, you can't bend my knuckle all the way back to touch the back of my hand. It's going to snap. But babies with low muscle tone have this hypermobility in their joints, and their joints are kind of loose and what you might call lax joints. Now, if that's your baby, for instance, if you put your baby to stand, they will do something the technical term is genu recurvatum, which just means that their knees tend to go like this, where the knees are hyperextended. Like you can see she's standing, but her knees are like going backwards. We call it, some clinicians call them backward knees, where the knees kind of extend backwards beyond the vertical, where the knees are actually out back here. One thing that you can do that I like to do to be able to test for this is just kind of pop your hand in the back of the knee, and you will notice the baby the leg bends, and then baby kind of catches it. Like where the knee does not bend, it kind of breaks. It's almost as if you are standing and someone pops in the back of your knee, and the next thing you know, your baby's in like a half squat like this, and then they come back up into standing, and immediately those knees go back into hyperextension. So these are all things that you can keep an eye out for that lets you know that, okay, you know what? My baby may have low muscle tone or hypotonia. Another thing to look at with your baby is poor protective reflexes. What's a protective reflex? A protective reflex is you are moving along and you fall, and your hand automatically reaches out to protect yourself, to break your fall. It's called a protective reaction, protective extension, actually. And babies with low muscle tone or hypotonia tend to have kind of decreased protective reactions where baby will trip and fall before they have a chance to extend that arm and protect herself. So you might have baby walking along and then baby trips and falls and boom, they're down on their face before they actually have an opportunity to put their hand out. Why is that? And that's because their body is slow to react. Their brain is still processing, harnessing that power that needs to be generated in order to put your hands out and protect yourself. And so they tend to have poor reflexes, but also their reaction time tends to be a little bit delayed. If you have a toddler, you might notice that your toddler is kind of clumsy. Your toddler can't catch a ball. Why? Because when someone throws the ball at them, by the time they can get themselves together and react, the ball has already hit them in the face or the ball has already passed. And so they're not able to do things like catching a ball. Now, another set of symptoms that may kind of sneak under the radar are these oral motor symptoms where babies with hypotonia tend to drool a lot. They tend to have what's called an open mouth posture where their lip is just hanging. And when I say drool a lot, that's probably not describing it properly. Imagine if you have a baby and you have to change 20 of those little bibs every single day because it's wet, it's soaked, baby is just drooling that much. If your baby has really low muscle tone or like a true classical case of hypotonia, with hypotonia there are kind of levels where some kids, they're kind of low tone, but you're like, you can still do some stuff. And then we have those that are just like, oh my goodness, you're so super floppy. So now you have babies who drool a lot, like I said. They tend to gag when they're drinking thin liquids, for instance, water and milk. They will gag on it or aspirate, and the next thing you know, now they're having a hard time feeding. They tend to have a lot of oral motor issues, and they're not able to latch on properly to mom's breast. They're not able to sip from a sippy cup because sucking from a straw is a lot of work. For kids who are a little bit older, those who are actually eating, you might notice they have a preference for really soft foods where they will eat like pudding, they could eat jello, they want to eat like pasta and things like that. But you give them a piece of chicken and they don't want to eat it. Why? Because that endurance of just chewing onto something that's tough is very challenging for these babies. So these are some of the classic symptoms of hypotonia. And like I said, in the next video, I'm going to talk a little bit about some activities and some exercises that you can do in order to help a baby who has low muscle tone. Let me just make sure I did not skip anything. So, yes. They have poor hand-eye coordination. We talked about that. Timing, floppy joints, clumsy, falling often, poor protective reflexes, fingers, thumbs extended backwards. Yes. So hopefully this video shed a little bit of light on exactly what hypotonia is. And I wish I could tell you that there was a diagnosis of you can have a diagnosis of hypotonia, but you're not going to get a cause. It is associated with some genetic conditions, things like Prader-Willi syndrome, Down syndrome, spina bifida. These babies tend to have low muscle tone or hypotonia. And the hypotonia is a symptom of an underlying neurological condition. It's not the primary cause of something. One final point I wanted to make before we hop off is a lot of times I've heard parents say to me, oh, my baby's just lazy. To me, that's kind of like a convenient excuse where you put the blame on baby and say baby is not motivated, baby is lazy. Baby is actually working harder to sit and maintain this position than you and I are. You and I are sitting and we're relaxing. We're not really working that hard in order to keep our body up against gravity. Try to imagine your little one fighting a 24-hour battle against gravity. I mentioned the baby before that if you put baby to lay on their back, what you will notice is this baby, if the baby had low muscle tone, will typically do this. The head will kind of flop to one side. The legs will rotate outwards. The arms will also be outwards. And everything will just look as if your baby is literally trying to become part of the floor. And, we talked about the W sitting. One of the things you might notice with your baby is that your baby will kind of do this, where baby might be on their tummy, and your baby will somehow be able to push themselves up and then bring their legs out around the outside of their body like this, and now come into sitting. And you're like, how do you get from being on your tummy into sitting? The reason for that is, like I said, baby has hypermobile joints. Their hip joints are so flexible that baby can go from lying on their tummy, push their chest up off the ground, and just bring their legs around in front of them like this, and now baby is sitting. Here's the problem with sitting like that or coming into a sitting position in this manner. Baby is supposed to go from sitting, be able to go down in a sideways motion and come up. The fact that baby is coming up vertically, your little one is ignoring all of those side muscles and rotation muscles that should be involved in sitting and moving, transitioning from being on the ground up into sitting. Your baby should be lying on the ground and then push themselves up on their knees and then kind of push themselves up onto their bottom when baby is trying to sit. You don't want to see baby going from lying on their tummy up into sitting without doing any kind of rotation of work. So in my next live, I'm going to dive into some specific exercises and movement strategies that you can use for your little one to help them overcome the hypotonia. All right? I'll talk to you soon.